Hi, everyone. We are at this session called Ketogenic Diet for Seizure Control. My name is Cramer. I am secretary of the GRIN Foundation. I'm a mom of a 3-year-old boy with GRIN 1 mutation. During this session, we will have 2 presenters. We will have Stacey Nichols presenting her real-life experience with ketogenic diet with her daughter, and we will have Amy Ramsey to present her research on ketogenic diet with her mice. There will be questions. If you have any questions during the session, please try to put them in the Q&A tab. If not, I will do my best to monitor. I will hand over to Stacey Nichols now.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. It has been amazing already so far at the conference. I've learned so much, and I know that there's still quite a bit more to be shared and to be learned, so I'm excited about that. And I'm here today to share with you our family's experience with using the ketogenic diet to treat seizures. So I do have some materials that are part of this presentation that I won't be covering directly, simply in the interest of time. So part of that is just basic diet information and just basic information about the ketogenic diet. I know we have a wide audience of folks, and so some people may not be quite as familiar. So I have moved those slides all the way to the very end. And then also, as I'm speaking on some of the slides, there may be some clinical information that I won't have a chance to go through piece by piece. But certainly as this talk is being recorded, at your convenience and as interest exists, if you'd like to go back during the recording, you can just simply advance to those slides as part of this talk. And if you just hit the pause button, you can go through and you'll have a little bit more time to kind of look through some of those parts and pieces. So what I am here to talk to you about today is Leela's experience with seizures, both before and after the ketogenic diet. And then I'll also talk a little bit about our future expectations for seizure control. So this first slide is a lot of pictures. In the center, you will see my family. There's my husband and I. And then we also have our 4 children who range in age from 15 all the way down to age 7. So I'm still not quite sure how we've gotten to this point that my kids are so big and so grown up, but here we are. And then the other pictures are my Leela, who is 10 years of age and was diagnosed with GRIN 1 variant back in 2012. And really my hope in presenting these pictures to you, I just wanted you to get kind of a visual of where she is developmentally. So what you can see here is that she's a very, very happy young lady. She loves to be active. She loves to be engaged. She loves to be up and moving around. But also what you see is that she does require quite a bit of support in order to engage in those activities. So Leela started having seizures, I think, somewhere around the age of 2. I will say that it's quite possible that I didn't quite notice some of those absent seizures because I just didn't know what they were, and it didn't occur to me that they were anything abnormal. So started around the age of 2. And you can see here listed just a different progression of the different types of seizures that we've encountered since then, all the way up through age 10. And so even to date, really some of the biggest issues that we've had and that do remain are nocturnal seizures. And I've heard those mentioned quite a few times today by families during the conference and in the chat sessions. So I think that's something that a lot of us are facing. And with the nocturnal seizures, we do have a lot of tonic-clonic styles. We were informed by our neuro, because Leela's seizures tend to be so short, most of them are under 30 seconds. And so for a long time, our neuro kind of assured us that it was okay not to treat with heavy meds, simply because the seizures weren't likely to be causing any neurological damage because of the brevity. Also, they weren't really impacting her daily quality of life until about age 8 or 9, when we started having more cluster seizures, tonic-clonic style, throughout the course of the day. And so at that point, we started treating with Keppra. We also were using Klonopin as a rescue med. Both of those medications really did not work out too well for us. We switched to valproic acid around that time. And valproic acid has been good up through, we actually just weaned off of it in August. And so it worked fairly well for us for mood and balance control and affect. something that is kind of interesting is that by the age of 10, Leela started having, many of you families may be in this situation where, of course, there are some days where your kids are just upset, where they're inconsolable, they're a bit nettled, they may be frustrated. And for Leela, when she was having those types of days, it was really interesting to see right around age 10 that one of her coping mechanisms was to actually start lifting her hand in front of a light source. And she would kind of wave it around, but she would actually induce a seizure. And so after she had that seizure, you could see that her whole body would actually relax, and it was almost like her brain reset herself. And I didn't know that this was a thing, but I was informed by neuro at UVA that there is a syndrome called sunflower syndrome where patients can induce seizures on purpose. And so it was just kind of an interesting thing to see that it was almost like Leela was actually intentionally resetting her brain by triggering a seizure like that. So I did put some EEG clinical information on this slide. We certainly have had a wide variety of EEGs over the years. The two that I selected to go on this slide are both EEGs where we did have some type of abnormal result. And I shouldn't say abnormal because I think there are a lot of families that run into this in a very frustrating fashion where it's atypical but not technically clinically abnormal. So in 2017, I insisted on an overnight sleep study. So we did that, and you can read here kind of what the results were. What is of note that I wanted to share, because I think that there are more than a few families that run into problems with GRIN. One of the results that was returned was that Leela has an abnormal phase 2 sleep pattern. And of course, you know, that kind of goes along with some of her nocturnal seizures. So that was just something that was of interest to me as a parent. And I would love to see additional research with GRIN kids and adults and patients in terms of just sleep and how seizures are related to that. So I have listed here some of the medications that we've been off and on. In terms of developmental progress, where Leela has been, and you saw in some of those pictures, she does experience and continues to experience profound delays in all domains. And of course, with GRIN-related disorder, she has more than a few of the typical symptoms that we see in GRIN 1 kids, some issues with sensory regulation. She has some vision issues with cortical visual impairment. There are some GI issues. Sometimes when she's eating orally, she has trouble with choking and eating safely. And then, of course, we have that ongoing issue of seizures. So I had mentioned that when Leela was between 8 and 9, that was kind of our worst time, I think, for seizures, or maybe I hadn't mentioned that yet, but at any rate, it was. And at that point, our total seizure count usually hit somewhere around between 50 and 60 on bad days. Now, I will say I know that for some of you, that is just a drop in the bucket. And so my hope and my earnest hope is that for those of you who are facing even more seizures than that, I really, really hope that you guys are able to find a way to dampen out that number and to help kind of assuage some of those seizure problems. But for us, the total on bad days was roughly around 60. And again, most of those seizures were very short, just under 30 seconds. Nocturnally, again, that was the majority of our seizures. And so what we would see is that generally between about 8:30 p.m. and 7 a.m., or some variation in there, we would often see up to about 35 seizures within that time period. And it was interesting because even timing her sleep and just kind of correlating when those seizures occurred in terms of when she fell asleep, it was interesting to see that a lot of those nocturnal seizures actually occurred in a fairly cyclical fashion that seemed to correspond to what the chronological timing would be for sleep stage shifts. The other time that we would see nocturnal seizures is when Leela would startle during her sleep. So those are kind of the main problems that we had been having. Okay, so here we are. This is Leela, age 10, pre-ketogenic diet as of December 2019. And at this point, from a developmental standpoint, and you guys may be able to relate to this as well, but Leela has been great at making steady progress, but it's very, very slow progress. And we also find with Leela that her progress is highly variable. So there might be one day that she is fantastic at using her speech device to say something, or there might be a day that she's really good at having reciprocal stepping motion when she is ambulating. But what we find is that she might do it one day, and then 3, 6, 9, 12 months may go by and we don't see it again. So again, it's just highly, highly variable, but it is heartening to see that they're, at least up through keto diet starting, we were definitely seeing a progression there. So at this point in December 2019, Leela was definitely eating orally for the most part, and then we were supplementing her calorie intake with formula. And at this point, as of late December 2019, seizure counts would be on average up to, kind of 35 per night, and all of those would be nocturnal. And then we would maybe have like an additional 2 to 3 over the course of the day that were related to startling. So January 2020, not that long ago, we decided to go ahead and start the keto diet. So Leela went inpatient at the University of Virginia Keto Clinic, and she was inpatient for about 4 days. So when we started the diet, she was about 58 pounds, so definitely pretty slim, pretty light for her age and for her build. And during that inpatient period, of course, providers were very much monitoring Leela. They wanted to make sure that her body was healthy and well during the transition into ketosis. And I would say that probably the bulk of the focus during that 4-day period was teaching this mama how to manage all things keto. So keto is a lot to wrap one's head around. So during that time in the hospital, I learned very precise measurement methods for putting together the formula, for making sure that the oral foods were put together properly. I learned all sorts of home testing. There's a lot of monitoring that we do at home. And especially I learned how to use and navigate the Keto Calculator software, wherein oral ingredients and recipe, I guess I should say with Keto Calculator recipes, there are certain amounts and certain types of ingredients that go together. And then all together, these recipes basically create a certain ratio for any particular oral meal or any type of oral snack that Leela might have. But it's very important for her to have the exact ratio that is the prescribed ratio for her keto diet. So I have listed our provider information here at UVA. Dr. Aksine was sorry that she could not join us today on this panel. She had another obligation. But again, during that inpatient stay, Leela was transitioned to the classic ketogenic diet. And I mentioned that simply because there are quite a few different types of therapeutic keto diet. So we are doing the classic diet. I will say that during the inpatient period, there was no fasting. That was something that kept us from the ketogenic diet for many years because our local neuro had said that Leela would have to basically fast for 3 days to get into ketosis. So that was not true. So there was no fasting. And then the particular ratio that was prescribed for Leela was a 3-to-1 ratio. And then with the intention of providing her with oral as well as G-tube feedings. So what we saw within the first 2 weeks of Leela's transition into ketosis and on the ketogenic diet was pretty much par for the course. So there was an increase in seizures at first, and then there was a little bit of irritability. There were some kind of interesting bodily changes that took place. But what was really good news for us was that at that 2-week period, we saw a drastic drop in the number of seizures that Leela was having. And for a lot of families, it may take months. It can take up to 6 months for folks to see a change if one is going to happen. And again, the keto diet does not work for everybody. But we were very fortunate that as early as 2 weeks in, we were already seeing a drastic drop off in terms of the number of seizures. So I do want to mention for anyone considering keto diet that if you are taking any types of liquid medications, because of the sugar content in those types of medications have to be switched over into a tablet form. Again, just to drop the carbohydrate impact of that medication. So just something to keep in mind. That's something that we had to do. So with this slide here, I won't spend too much time on it. There's some clinical stuff for folks who are interested. On the left-hand side, what you see is a picture of a typical meal for Leela. She gets quite a few of these per day. There are more than a few medications that are mixed in there. I would like to point out that the keto diet is by no means a balanced diet. And so because of that, there's quite a few supplements that need to be worked into the daily routine of calorie intake, again, just to make sure that the patient stays well and healthy. Really, my only point with this slide that I will focus on in the interest of time is that, again, the ketogenic diet is a lot to wrap one's head around. There's a lot of time that can go into putting together the formulas and mixing the formula every day, and especially in terms of crafting and creating those oral foods. So there's a lot that goes into that. I have included here a website that may be of interest to families who think the keto diet might be something that they would like to consider. I do have some resources at the end of the presentation as well that I will be sure to show you so that you can go back and review that if you choose to go back and look at the recording. So here's the big deal. Where are we now? Did it work? Yes, the answer is yes. For us, it has worked actually quite well. So if you recall, back when Leela started the keto diet just in January, she was 57, 58 pounds. Really about maybe a month or 2 months in, she had already bounced up to 70 pounds. She is currently 71 pounds. So we actually had to pull back her calories a little bit. And I find that very interesting because our keto practitioners at UVA shared that usually when people go on the keto diet, just like in the real world, typically they lose weight. And so what was really interesting with Leela, and what I'm hopeful that Dr. Ramsey may mention at some point, is I know I've heard talk at some point of GRIN perhaps being a glucose deficient disorder. And so it was almost like Leela, even though she had plenty of glucose and plenty of energy available for her brain prior to keto, it's almost like her body couldn't really use it very well. And so as soon as we switched over to keto, she had this huge blossom in terms of weight gain. We had all sorts of secondary changes that I probably could have done without. But at any rate, it just really seemed like her body was thriving and was finally getting the energy that it really needed to grow and to develop. So in terms of seizure counts, if you recall that when we started keto diet, on average, we were having maybe 35 overnight nocturnally. And so now we're down to really only 1 or 2 nocturnal seizures per night. And actually, those seizures are incredibly short. So they were short before, under 30 seconds. Now they're probably under 10 seconds. And so really, even the way that they look is very different. Previously, they were more of a tonic-clonic style. And now what I may see in Leela's cameras at night when I'm monitoring is maybe an utterance, maybe an arm will move. But I know because of the timing of it, I know that it is a seizure and it's likely to be a seizure. So the type of seizure, it just, everything seems to have kind of dampened out, which is really good. I will say that with regard to startle seizures, we don't see any of those during the day anymore. The only time that I might see a startle seizure is when Leela's in her car seat coming home from school. If she falls asleep and is taking a quick nap, and if the car hits a bump and sort of jostles her, we might see a startle seizure there. But otherwise, we really don't see them at all during the day. The other really big thing is we were talking about the sunflower syndrome and that intentional induction seizure where Leela would trigger it. We don't see that at all anymore. So that has been really, really good from a parent standpoint. The other major things that I wanted to point out now that Leela is doing the keto diet, and again, I can't say for sure a cause effect. It could be that as Leela was hitting adolescence, some of these seizures would be dampening out anyway. I don't know, but definitely we started the keto diet and we are actually seeing some very different things from what we had been. So one of those things is that we are now seeing noticeable and very consistent improvement in all domains, which is huge as a parent. I'm so thrilled that I see some sort of a skill or something happening, and then it happens again the next day, and then it happens again the next day. And so I'm just relieved for Leela that she is developing in a consistent way because she looks so darned proud of herself. So also another thing.
Interrupt. Sorry, you are at 17 and almost 18.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
There's a question for you actually waiting. So
okay, you got it. So
I'm to read the rest. And there is a somebody asking, were you suspicious of nocturnal seizures, or was your EEG result a total surprise?
No, it wasn't a total surprise. It was just more that we had done EEGs in the past that were sleep EEGs, and the clinical interpretation of that was not that they were seizures, or the neuro didn't really seem to feel like what she was experiencing were actual seizures. So when we finally did that one sleep study in 2017, and on video, and then there was corresponding EEG evidence that showed rhythmic motor behaviors that to me looked like tonic-clonic, and then a shift in the EEG pattern that again was not a textbook type of seizure in terms of EEG pattern. But it was still something that neuro said, okay, something is clearly happening here. And in fact, what he diagnosed her with was a benign paroxysmal sleep disorder, just meaning that something strange was happening while she was sleeping. We didn't really know what it was. But he humored me, and then he went ahead and prescribed an anti-epileptic, and that actually really seemed to help with the nocturnal seizures at that point.
Ooh. Okay, can I say thank you to Stacey for a wonderful
Yes.
presentation?
Thank you, guys.
Here comes Amy, who will present on her animal models.
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so my disclaimer here is that I am not a clinician, and I really wish that there was a nutritionist or a neurologist here who could talk about this part, but I am going to go ahead and do my best. I did a little bit of research myself on this. And so I wanted to point out this paper, which is one of the most cited papers. It's in Lancet Neurology from 2008. And this is where they found that the ketogenic diet was really successful in children especially, but it's now been extended to adults as well with epilepsy to reduce seizures. And in some cases, people can become seizure-free with the ketogenic diet. But then another resource for me was this review article that was published in January of 2019 in Frontiers of Neuroscience. And so if you want to do some reading about how the ketogenic diet, how we think it's working, this was a nice review for me. And one of the things that Stacey mentioned is that there are now several diets that have been discovered. So at first, I think the first thing that was discovered was that starvation seemed to reduce seizures in people who had epilepsy. But of course, that's no solution for epilepsy. And then it was in 1920 that this ketogenic diet, so what was discovered that it could do the same thing as starvation, but with the added benefit that you get to stay alive, but it is pretty severe. So in this article, they were saying the classic diet was 4 parts of fat for every 1 part of protein plus carbohydrate. And so it sounds like in Stacey's case, they were doing 3 parts fat for every 1 part protein and carbohydrate. And so even that is better. But there have also been success with a modified Atkins diet and the low glycemic index diet. So with a modified Atkins diet, you reduce the fat to 65%, and the rest is 25% protein and 10% carbohydrates. And then with a low glycemic index, you can decrease that fat down to 60% and up the protein and carbohydrate by using carbohydrates that have a low glycemic index. So there's lots of possibilities, and as Stacey said, this requires at least a nutritionist and a a neurologist who can monitor the epilepsy, the seizures. So there's a lot of preparation that needs to be done, and it's not trivial. And for those reasons, we would like to understand really how the ketogenic diet works, because if we could understand which aspect of this was really causing this benefit to seizures, then maybe we could provide that aspect of the ketogenic diet without necessarily having such a drastic change to the diet. So we call this the mechanism of action. So what is the critical part of the ketogenic diet that is most benefiting the brain? So these are some of the ideas that we have right now, that scientists have right now about what's working. when you're in starvation mode, or when you have a very low carbohydrate diet and you don't have a lot of sugar around, your body starts converting fats into ketones. And these ketone bodies can be used by the brain to make energy. So it's a different source of energy than glucose, which is what the brain prefers. And it seems that low glucose is actually good for managing seizures, but maybe it's because your body is making these ketones instead. Another feature that could be explaining it is that these diets are so high in fat that they're providing a lot of these medium chain triglycerides, and that those could have beneficial effects. These things are not necessarily exclusive, so they could be having additive effects. Another thing that's been documented is that the ketogenic diet and some of these ketone bodies, or MCTs, have anti-inflammatory effects. So they reduce inflammation in the body and even in the brain. The indications of inflammation are reduced. Another thing that happens is that there's a lot of indications that the mitochondria, which provide energy to the neurons, their function improves on a ketogenic diet. And maybe it's because they're getting a different energy source, and now they're being fed through these ketone bodies rather than the normal way that mitochondria get their energy, which is through glucose. Even more, people are looking at whether there are changes to genes and epigenetics, which I'm not really going to go into very much. But another one that's really just recently been studied is the idea that, well, these bacteria that live in our gut, we always thought that they were kind of just sucking nutrients and not doing much for us, but actually they're providing a lot of nutrients that our body and our brain need. And depending on what diet we have, our microbiome changes. So the bacteria that are populating our gut change, and as a result, the nutrients that they're giving back to our body change. So with this ketogenic diet, there are drastic changes to the biome, and that those nutrients that the bacteria provide could be the answer. So what we want to do is identify which aspect of the ketogenic diet is really helping, so that for those patients where, you know, it's not possible to do the ketogenic diet, maybe we can help in some other way. So we are working with mice, and I just wanted to list some of the mouse models that we have. So on the left-hand side, we have the mice the knockdown mice have GRIN1 mutation, that they have just low levels of GRIN1, and so they have low levels of NMDA receptor. And now we're starting to build some of the patient variant mice. And so we have done some work with this one, and we've just imported this one, and we're in the process of developing these two here. And just to answer the question about other models that have been made, these are some of the other models that have already been made, and there are others that are being developed. So, you know, the GRIN community is doing a great job at making mice. And to speak to Stacey's point about glucose, yes, this was the starting point for why we became interested in the ketogenic diet. We were not actually interested so much in seizures as we were in just a concern that the brain wasn't getting enough energy, because the brain really needs glucose to run. That's its preferred energy source. But in studying these mice, it looked like all of those mechanisms that bring glucose into the brain were not working. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, but just enough to say that in our detective work, we're seeing all of these signs that glucose wasn't really being utilized properly in the brain. And one of the other things I wanted to mention is that when your child's brain is working, you know, and doing a specific task, there might be some area where the neurons are firing, and those neurons that are firing need more energy. And there's actually a system in place where when the neuron fires, it communicates with these other cells in the brain, like astrocytes and the blood vessels in the brain, to say, hey, I need more energy. And what these cells do is they upregulate the glucose transporter, and they actually bring more blood into the area, and they bring more glucose, and they need these transporters to go in to the neurons. So you need these glucose transporters, sorry about that, in order to actually get that glucose into the brain. And those were not being expressed at the levels that they needed to be expressed. So this is why we thought we need to provide another energy source. And so we used these mice, we gave them a ketogenic diet, or we gave them one of the ketone bodies. That's the main ketone body that's made during ketosis, during a ketogenic diet, which is called beta hydroxybutyrate. So I will stop there. I'm so sorry.
I am so sorry too. The time really got away from us, but
okay.
There is, half an hour is obviously not enough to even, go anywhere near ketogenic diet as a topic. But thank you so much. There are no answered questions, and we will see you at the big Q&A. So
okay.
Thank you so much, Stacey and Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I went long.
No,
that's okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.